This may surprise a lot of you, but I'm actually turning 77 years old this year and I look amazing. So what's the secret to my good looks and longevity? Well, it might be kettlebells. So let's talk about what the evidence says about kettlebell training for longevity, aka living better for longer. And I talk about all these factors in my 30 ways in 30 days to go from a beginner to a black belt in home fitness fundamentals, which you can sign up for free below, the links in the description. But let's talk about the first reason that kettlebells can improve your longevity, and that is muscular strength and power, especially in the lower body. So we know from all of the scientific literature out there that muscle strength and power are directly associated with a lower risk of dying, basically. And they're also associated with a much higher physical function in more elderly adults. So we're talking people in their 70s and 80s. And we've talked about being over 40, you are going to start losing about 8% of your muscle mass each decade unless you do something about it to intervene. If you start exercising, you start training your muscles. So if you're any age, but especially if you're over 40, you should be doing some leg movements at least twice per week. This could be anything from bodyweight squats to goblet squats, kettlebell sumo deadlifts, lunges, split squats. Anything that uses the legs is going to be beneficial in building and maintaining lifelong muscle strength and power. And we also know that kettlebell training significantly improves grip strength, it improves leg strength and explosive power. So an important point to make is that there's a difference between strength and power. So strength is the total amount of force that your muscles can produce, and power is how quickly can your muscles produce that force. When we look at more elderly populations and falls risk, it's not necessarily just strength that we want to improve, we also want to improve power, because you can have all the strength in the world, but if you trip over something and you don't have enough power to generate a movement quickly enough to stabilize yourself, your risk of falling and hurting yourself, especially in your 70s and 80s, goes way up. So loads of benefits there, and these changes can start to occur within as little as 12 weeks of training. Okay, let's move on to cardiovascular health. So we've talked at length about VO2 max, which is basically just a measure of how efficient your heart and lungs are at doing their job. But VO2 max is a very, very strong predictor of lifespan, and research says that high repetition kettlebell swings can give you a heart rate and VO2 response that's similar to moderate to high intensity exercise. So basically, that just means that doing kettlebell swings is an effective exercise at building your cardiovascular fitness and therefore improving your longevity. Bone density. You can prevent osteopenia and osteoporosis, which is basically a loss of bone mineral content or a loss of bone density. So imagine the inside of your bones get more and more hollow as you get older. You can prevent and even reverse this by doing weight-bearing exercise, by doing kettlebell training. And I have to be honest, the evidence on this particular subject is limited and it is emerging. There's some to suggest that ballistic loading, so basically doing things like cleans, swings, snatches, can provide a sufficient stimulus to either maintain or build bone density. So when we talk about longevity, bone density is important, especially with regards to keeping your independence as you move into older age and reducing the harm done from potential falls. And talking of falls, let's talk about functional movement and balance. Falls, along with kind of a loss of mobility, are one of the top causes of disability in older adults. So kettlebells involve a lot of dynamic movements, a lot of movement patterns in different directions. So they will improve coordination, they will improve gait, which is how you walk, how strong your hips are, and they'll improve dynamic balance. So how good is your balance whilst you're moving? And now cognitive health. So for the last 5 to 10 years, there's been emerging research about dementia and Alzheimer's disease that says resistance and aerobic training may be linked to a reduction in your risk of developing dementia and Alzheimer's. There are certain cognitive demands of exercise, and especially kettlebell movements, because it's a skill, because it requires sort of coordination, rhythm, motor learning, so you have to make new brain connections in order to learn it. So I'm not an expert on Alzheimer's or dementia, so I'm not going to talk too much about it, but there is some evidence that by moving, by getting active, doing resistance training, doing kettlebell training, you can potentially reduce your risk of developing these diseases. And I think this next point is the most important one, and that is adherence and accessibility. So we talk a lot on this channel about consistency and how I would rather do something completely non-optimal but consistently than do something inconsistently that is optimal, because over time I'm going to get far better results. And research shows that adherence to kettlebell training, kettlebell programs where you're not reliant on transport, you're not reliant on busy gym hours or gym opening times, kettlebell training adherence is usually higher than other traditional programs where you do have to go to a gym or you do have to spend extra time and extra energy doing it. So kettlebells obviously are time efficient, they're portable, and they're a bit more enjoyable. And I know that is a subjective claim, some people might think they're really boring, but I think most people who try them them actually find them more enjoyable than traditional gym workouts, and I certainly do. So overall, it comes back to the classic debate about kettlebells. A lot of people in my comment section love to tell me that kettlebells aren't really the best tool at training anything, and that's kind of the point. Like, kettlebells can suboptimally train all of these areas, and in doing so results in more consistency and more time efficiency, which means over a long period of time they can yield far better results than more inconsistent, more optimal programs. So if you want to live better and longer, I suggest grabbing a kettlebell pretty soon. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.